Hey, Grace, wanted to send you a quick video announcement, both to talk about application and some details, but more importantly, talk about hearts and souls and shepherding. This week, you're probably aware that the governor has asked the state of Ohio to submit to a mask mandate, and that's for any gathering or assembly of people that are indoors. And so I want to just kind of talk to you about that as a church. And the first thing I want to do, honestly, before we get to application and action with it, is to just talk about how are we doing in the midst of all of this COVID situation and responses to it and everything that's happening. And I think one of the things that came to my mind was there was kind of four different F's that I would use as words that just briefly describe kind of what I've felt and what I've heard coming from other people as well. First F is the word frustration, right? Frustration about the fact that, we started talking about this and taking action in mid-March, and we thought there were solutions, and now we don't know if there's solutions to that. Frustration about the fact that we don't know what data is accurate data and who to believe that's transcribing or translating, making sense of the data for us. Frustration about whether the government is taking action to protect us, or if the government is overextending beyond what its action should be. I've talked to a lot of people that they're frustrated right now. And we want to let you know, as elders, we're coming to you saying we don't condemn the attitude of frustration. In fact, we totally get it. We've felt that as well. I talked to other people, and fear is maybe a primary emotion for them. They're either afraid of the virus, afraid for family members who are especially susceptible to the virus, or they're afraid of the loss of rights. They're afraid of the consequences, the social distancing and shelter in place, and some of those things have created of other needs or circumstances that have come. And again, those are legitimate feelings. Fear does not mean the absence of faith, right? Fear is something, though, that gives us the opportunity to exercise our faith and remember where we've placed it. I think maybe the primary emotion that a lot of people have felt is fatigue. We're just tired. We're tired of the situation. We're tired of having to not know whether you can hug somebody or shake their hand. We're tired of the bickering and the fighting that's happening in the media and with politicians and in our society. And I think part of the reason why we're tired is our world has just increasingly moved in a direction where motivation comes by fear, guilt, and shame. And so we try and get people to do what we want on either side of a question by making them feel afraid, or we try and coerce them into doing what we want by making them feel really embarrassed if they don't join along in what we're doing, or we try and force them into our way by just making them feel really heavy and guilty and bad for holding to the view or to the actions that they do. And it's exhausting to have to kind of live under that kind of yoke. Last one, I think, is the result of all of those together is just the word fracture comes to mind. Everything feels so divisive right now and feels so polarized, and it feels like things are completely falling apart around us. And so in light of all of those emotions, we can find ourselves then wondering, well, what is the proper response we should have? What should our attitude be like? Well, I just want to quickly quote from Romans 13. It says, "Let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authorities resists what God has appointed, and those who resist will incur judgment." Now, let me say, we live in a unique place because with a democratic republic, we're part of the government. Right? So we are submitting to the institution, but we're also working in the midst of the institution. And so there is nothing wrong with responding and worrying about government overreach or taking actions toward things in either direction that you think is right that are according to the means that we've already been given by our government. But we also have to remember our attitude toward the government is not supposed to be based upon their performance. And I think it's easy for us to lose sight of that. Remember the context of this. Paul's not writing to a democratic republic. Paul's writing to people who are under a dictatorship. And the emperor of Rome has not always been good to Christians. In fact, remember, he's writing this letter to people where the word about the impact of the gospel has extended beyond Rome to the rest of the world. And the reason the world knows about the church that's in Rome is because the emperor of Rome kicked all Jews, including Christians, out of the city of Rome for a period of time. They've now been allowed back in the city, and Paul is writing to those very people and saying, you need to be having an attitude of submission towards your government, toward the very people that kicked them out of the city. So an attitude of submission should drive our response. You might say, so does that mean we're floor mats? We do whatever the government tells us to do and we get walked on? No, there is such a thing as civil disobedience. Acts chapter 4, the disciples are sitting in front of the authorities and they have jailed them for preaching the gospel. They're now releasing them from jail and they say to them, here's the deal. We're letting you out of jail, but you need to drop the message. Quit preaching the gospel. And the disciples answer with this. They say, whether it is right in the sight of God to listen to you rather than to God, you're going to have to judge that one. For we cannot but speak what we have seen and heard. They basically look at the very people who threw them into jail and say, you're going to figure out what you're going to do with us because we are going to preach the gospel. We cannot disobey what God desires for us. The church is called corporately to civil disobedience when the government calls for the church to violate our obedience to Jesus. And so if you want to take action about mask issues, and some of that might even be in some form of civil disobedience or something, it's totally within your right to do that, even in our government. But for the church, when we corporately gather together, it doesn't seem that that's the right time for us to try and make some sort of statement unless that statement is about our fidelity to the gospel. And so as we look at this issue, we don't see as elders how wearing a mask is calling any of us in the body of Christ to violate our obedience to Jesus Christ. And so for that reason, we think when we gather together to worship, that's not the moment for us to necessarily express our opinions about what the government is saying, but it's our moment to really focus on Christ. It's our moment to talk about loving our neighbor. And I'm not using it as the rhetoric of you only love your neighbor if you're wearing a mask. I don't mean it that way. I mean it in the sense, though, of how do we interact with each other? How do we show love to one another when we're here in this building together? Do we seek to preserve peace? How are we going to go out to the world and tell the world that Jesus Christ reconciled us to God? He took us from being enemies to friends if we seem contentious and battling, or are we going to have a spirit of peace together? Are we going to call people to a gospel where Jesus laid down his heavenly rights and took on the form of man and suffered and died so that we can have salvation, and yet you and I are going to communicate in a different way? No, let us be people who are willing to say, hey, we also too can lay down our rights for the sake of others hearing about the gospel. We don't have to do like the world where we drive a message of fear, guilt, and shame to try and get people to do what we want. But instead, we talk about faith and grace and mercy and the love of God to try and win people to the justice of God that's found in Jesus Christ. And let's consider our brothers and sisters around the world who are facing genuine persecution. And what is their spirit when they gather together on a Sunday morning? Do they gather together on a Sunday morning and it's all about what the government has done? Do they gather together on a Sunday morning, it's all about what people around them might be thinking? No, if you had the opportunity to visit a persecuted church, when they gather together, they celebrate the gospel. And so let's let Sunday morning be a time where we gather together and our focus is on Jesus Christ, his death, his burial, his resurrection, and the new life that offers to us. That's the heart we want to convey. So now what are the applications of that? Here's the things that we would like to ask you to do. We would like to ask you to consider then your ability to submit to this mask mandate, even as we gather together Sunday morning for worship. Now, I want to add this to it. The governor himself even stated some people don't wear a mask. Some people can't wear a mask because of specific health issues that they are dealing with. And he even encouraged people. If you see somebody like that out in public, don't immediately condemn them. Don't immediately judge them because you don't know why they're not wearing a mask. So we're not going to be standing at the door as the mask police. We're not going to be enforcing it or forcing it upon you. We're just asking you to consider it and to do it as a way to show submission. But if you find yourself in a place where you don't feel like that's what you can do, you're still welcome to join us. Also, that mask mandate, he stated, does not apply to those who are under 10. And so if you got little kids and you're thinking, there's no way that's going to work, I think the government even understands that. So you don't have to feel required on that. Second of all, if you're going, man, it's not just about me in a mask. I have trouble hearing people in a mask. What's the point of even coming on Sunday morning? You need to know that it is okay for us as a church that the people on stage will not be wearing masks. So I'm going to be preaching, Lord willing, and I'm not going to be wearing a mask at that moment so that you'll be able to hear it clearly. And if you read lips to help you understand, you're going to be able to track along with that as well. The same with those who are musicians, so that hopefully you'll be able to see and hear things well. Lastly, then, let's just kind of keep two more F's, if we can come back full circle to this. Two more of them to keep in mind. One is the fruit of the Spirit. Whatever happens for Sunday morning, your response, if it's in the Spirit, is to be love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, and self-control. And whether you're wearing a mask or you're not wearing a mask, if you violate any of those, you can't say that you're walking in the Spirit. So let's make that our focus: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, and self-control. And the last one is even using the word finally as my last F and last point of the video. Romans 12, verse 10 says, "Finally, brethren, let us outdo one another in our love." We love you guys. We love Jesus. We love what he's done for us. And we want the center of our conversation we to get together to be that we love because he first loved us and he gave his life as a ransom for our sins. Love you guys. As always, feel free to reach out, call, email, whatever it might be. But looking forward to seeing you Sunday. And I guess that means that when I see you Sunday at the door in the narthex, you're going to see me looking like this.